CSIS 1430 is filmed before a live studio audience.
So here it is, folks, the moment you've been waiting for. CSS, yes, nice. CSS. But first, we got to just remind ourselves of a couple things, all right? So let's take like 5 minutes to breathe and think about this. Thing number one, what are the 3 components that I wanted to drill into your head every day about that make up the basis of HTML? What are they? Tags, attributes, and values. Yep, there you go. Tags, attributes, and values. We know what those are. That's a tag, right? Yes, we'll get to the practice part in a minute. You're right. That's a tag, right? Okay. And then we have inside of the bracket, the opening bracket, we have the attribute. So we can do href. That's the most common one you use with an anchor tag. Href equals something in quotes, right? And the href is the attribute, and of course the something in quotes is whatever we want. Let's just go to one of my sites. That's the value. Okay, this is all review, right? We know this, and then of course in between there we have the click here or whatever we're going to say about it. Okay. Let's just make sure we understand how attributes work, where they go, where they belong. Again, let's make a new one here, another anchor tag. The attribute always goes in the opening tag. So where's the opening tag? That one or that one? This one, that's the opening tag. So let's just scoot that guy over for a minute. This is the opening tag. So inside the opening tag, you always put the name of the tag, which in this case is just A. And then anywhere after that A, but before the closing little greater than symbol there, you can put all the attributes you want. As many as you want in any order you want, right? So we have href equals something in quotes. We're going to learn about this one later in the future. Class equals something in quotes. Style equals something in quotes. These are ones we haven't learned yet, but you can put them in there as many as you want, however many you want, any order you want. That's it. That's tags and attributes. That's like the last 5 lectures compressed into one thing, right? Now think about it. Once you learn this idea, what's the next big step? And you just said it a second ago. Practice. And what does that mean? That means learn the tags, right? Now I told you there's too many to memorize them all, but we know a lot of them. We've been over that before. We know the table, just the table has like 5 tags. Table, tr, td, th, right? We know about HTML, body, head, title. We know about h1 through h6. We know about anchor. We know about image. We know about ul, ol, li, right? There's a lot of different tags. We know tons of different tags. So it just takes practice getting good at it. You got to remember the structure, which we did on our 5-minute website, where you have the structure, all the structure here. Put all that together, remembering this, remembering tags, remembering attributes, and of course some attributes have limited values they can have, right? For example, an href can have whatever you want, right? An href can just be any website you want it to be. But then other ones have a limited value that they can use. So for example, the OL we learned about the other day, it has a type attribute, right? Type equals something in quotes. And that type can only be a handful of things, right? If you go to w3schools.com/tags, we look up the OL attribute, you can see all the values that type can have. And it's only 5 values, right? Just those 5 right there. So some have limited, some have whatever you want. So you got to remember a whole bunch of tags, whole bunch of attributes, and potentially a whole bunch of values, right? It's a lot of stuff. And we're just going to add to that when we get into CSS, right? It just takes practice. That's why every day we do a 5-minute website. Practice, first of all, you guys now I saw everybody's today, without hesitation, you guys busted out the doc type, the HTML, the head, the body, you had the structure perfect, right? And it only took you guys a couple of minutes. Now we got to learn more tags, and you keep drilling tags. And think about all the lectures we've had since day 1. It's only been 4 other than day 1. The other lectures we had, all we did was learn new tags. That's it. Just learn new tags. That's all there is to it. Well, with CSS today, what we're going to do is learn the equivalent of tags, attributes, and values for CSS. In CSS, it is selectors, properties, and values. So today we're going to learn the basics of selectors, properties, and values. how to structure them, like we learned how to structure these things by putting the attributes where they belong and so forth. We're going to learn how to structure that, how to put it into our HTML, and then the rest of the lectures from here on out will be learning more selectors, learning more properties, learning more values. That's it. That's all there is to CSS. We have to learn the syntax a little bit, okay? So, foundation, we good? Okay, what's a selector, what's a property, what's a value? Notice here, values in both places. In HTML, we assign values to attributes, right? In fact, if you put all these things together, it would look like this. Tag, attribute, equals value, and then close the tag. Right? Isn't that what's going on? Okay. Well, in the CSS world, the code looks a little different. The selector is the thing that you want to change and make look pretty on your website. Okay? So I want to make my paragraphs look a certain way, or I want my H1s to look a certain way. So I'm going to select my H1s by literally saying H1. That's it. I just selected it. That's legitimate code right there. I selected my H1. Then you're going to target a certain property. If you wanted to change in HTML the width of an image, you guys, some of you did this for your additional content on the YouTube assignment, right? How did you change the width of the image? You changed the width attribute to whatever number, 200 or whatever, right? Well, this is the same thing. We're going to change the width property. Properties and attributes, it's interchangeable. It's the same thing. I think I mentioned that a couple weeks ago that you'd hear those later on. They're interchangeable. So property, attribute. So I'm going to select, in this case, I want to change the background color of the heading 1. Right? Right now it's just see-through. It's just whatever color the body is, right? I want it to be blue. So you can target the background color by saying background color. That's what I want to change, or width, or height, or whatever the property is. Instead of saying equals something in quotes like we've been doing with HTML, we use a colon, and then we give it a color. So we're going to go with blue. This isn't quite ready yet, but this is the basic syntax, right? So once I add a couple things to this, then it'll be ready. Thing number 1 is curly braces, okay? Curly braces. So let's take a look at what's happening here, and I'll show you how to put it in your code in just a minute. This is my selector. I'm saying select the H1s. Select the H1s. This is the property. Once I have the H1s, I want you to target the background color property, or the width property, or the height property, right? These are some that you've kind of looked at already in your HTML. Once I've got the background color property, set its value to blue. So this colon is like the equal sign. You're just setting background color to blue. The semicolon must be there because that means that the code is over. That line of code ends. And this is a lot more similar to real programming languages, right? The semicolon is at the end, okay? So the reason we have this is because inside of those curly braces, I can change multiple properties, right? I could change let's go with the color of the text. And that property is called color, okay? Let's make that color of the text white, so it'll be white on a blue background. And notice here, now I've got two things that are going to change for the H1, okay? They're blocked out in these curly braces. The curly braces mean, hey, everything between them belongs to H1. Oh no, you could, yeah, that's a good question. You could do this. This is totally valid. Yep, just hard to read, but that's totally valid. Because that's exactly why you have those things, the semicolon, the curly brace. Because the curly brace here says, okay, I'm opening up the block of code. Let's get that out of there for a second. I'm opening up the block of code for the H1. And then whatever goes in there is, it's not the background color of paragraphs, it's the background colors of H1s, right? And it's blue is what I'm setting it to. And then I'm done. I'm ending right there. That's why the semicolon's there. Because if the semicolon were not there, then it will think that I'm saying background color colon blue color. What's blue color? Doesn't know what that means, right? So the semicolon lets it know, no, we're done. That's the end of that line. Here's a new line. So you don't have to put them on separate spaces. And in fact, you'll see in my code, if it's only two things like this, I'll do it on one line. But if it's multiple things, I'll do it in multiple lines.
Good question.
How specific can you be when it comes to color? Extremely. As specific as you can imagine and beyond.
To infinity and beyond.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Maybe not so much today, but we will look at it a little bit today. And we'll talk about that because that's a big part of how this all works. There's lots of ways to manipulate color. We should have a little bit of time to dive into pieces of it today, for sure. Let's see this in action. Let's put this in our code. So I'm going to break this back to where it was. That's a good question. The question is there an attribute that I could put into an HTML tag? You know, some tag, background, color, equals something in quotes. Does that exist? And the answer is, in some cases, yes, other cases, no. In this particular one, background color does not exist that I'm aware of, but like width and height do exist in both places. And so think about, and I'm glad you brought this up, because an attribute and a property, as far as the definitions of the word, just in the human language, they are the same thing. Like this table I'm sitting at. What is an attribute we could use to describe it? What kind of attributes could you describe it with? The weight of it, the height of it, the color of it, the depth of it, that kind of thing, right? And that's an attribute. The height is an attribute. How tall is it? I don't know, 4.5 feet or whatever. That is the value of that attribute. But height is also a property, right? What properties does this table have? Well, it has a height, it has a width, it has the same things. So those words are just interchangeable. Typically we use the word attributes with tags. We switched to the wording properties when CSS became a thing, which was 10, 15 years after the web, something like that. The reason for that is because that's more of a programming term, and CSS is kind of like programming. It's not quite real programming just yet, but its syntax is very similar, right? And so that's why we choose that sort of language. Yeah, that's the question, is where does this code go? That's the next part we're actually going to look at right now. We can do what's called inline. We can do what's called embedded. I think that's spelled right. And we can do a style sheet. In order of preference, least, next least, best, as far as when I use them. We'll explain all of them today. For now, I'm going to show you embedded. Okay, each one has its own time and place, and they have pros and cons. We'll get into all that in a minute. But for now, I'm going to show you embedded. So embedded is where it's literally embedded into the HTML page. Okay, and so to do that, is the CSS, is it content that displays on the page? You're right, it's not content. What is it then? It's metadata, it's information about the content, but it's not the content itself. You guys all agree with that? Okay, so since it's meta content, it's not actual content, it's metadata about the content, where's it go? The head, yeah. So that's okay. I'm glad that you said that, because let me just take a quick tangent for just a second here. There's 3 words here that people get confused in HTML: head, heading, and header. Those are all 3 completely different things. A heading, sorry about the all caps, but I'm going to leave it. Those are the headings, the H1 tag through the H6 tag. Those are headings. The head is the head, the head and the body tag. We talked about that, right? And then the header is a tag we haven't learned yet, but it is a tag and is a different thing. So we'll come to that. But yeah, these are, and don't feel bad, because this happens to everybody. When you're new, you forget which one's which. So don't sweat it. Anyway, but you were right. You were thinking the right thing, which was it belongs in the head. That is where we put the CSS. So here's a new tag. Our first new tag for the day. It is the style tag. So the style tag, okay? What this says, lines 5 through 7, says to the browser, hey browser, listen to me. Pay attention to me, browser.
Zion, hear me!
Everything between line 5 and line 7 is not HTML. It is style. It is style code. It is CSS. It is style code. So we put that right there, and when we save our page and refresh it, poof, we have a blue background on our H1. Okay? There's the premise. There's the foundation. There's your tags, attributes, and values from day one of HTML, right? It's properties, selectors, and values, or selectors, properties, and values for CSS. We're on baby step -3 right now, folks, so just don't panic. But how do you feel about the basics? Doing okay? Okay? So let's add to this. Notice I have two things I've changed here. Remember, a minute ago when we said tags, attributes, and values, we decided that once we learn that, then we just got to learn a whole bunch of tags, a whole bunch of attributes, and a whole bunch of values. Well, now that you know what a selector is, sort of, there's a whole bunch of selectors out there we haven't looked at yet. You know what a property is. You know what a value is. Now I'm going to throw a whole bunch of properties at you. So today's lecture is not meant to be, quote, teaching anything specifically. It's to expose you to a bunch of things, okay? So I'm going to throw a bunch of properties at you. I'm not expecting that you've mastered or memorized any of them today, okay? There are some that you're just going to have to know, and the only way to do it is it comes with practice. Starting not next time we meet, but a week from today when we meet, your 5-minute website will have to have some CSS in it, right? But for now, it won't. Well, I'll give you one more day with no CSS, and then next week you're going to have to do it. But how you get good at it? Practice. Practice, practice, practice. So let's talk about a couple properties. Number one, there's padding. You remember when we looked at tables, right? We had that cell spacing, cell padding situation. Well, there's a property called padding that just about every element on your website, on your web page, has that can be manipulated. Where is padding on this page in the H1? What would I be affecting if I change the padding? Very good way to put it. The word metallic would have a little bit more cushion in the blue there, right? It's butted all the way up against the left, okay? And it's kind of squished against the top and bottom there. The right's got plenty of room, but the left, top, and bottom. We're going to talk about this later, but I'm going to give you like 2 or 3 things that I want to sink in today. Thing number 1, selectors, properties, values. Pound that into your brain. Thing number 2, everything is a box. You don't even know what that means yet, but just say it with me. Everything is a box. Again. All right, I'm trying to indoctrinate you into my cult. Okay, everything is a box. Everything in HTML is a box. An H1's a box, a paragraph's a box. And we're going to have an entire lecture just on that idea. It's called the box model. And it shows us how all these properties all work together. But just for now, get that mantra into your head. Everything's a box. Okay. So in this blue box that you see is taking up the entire width of the screen, basically, I want to give some padding inside of the metallic, inside of the blue, so the metallic is not so squished. So I will set the padding to 20 pixels. There. Now it's got 20 pixel padding. Okay. I don't know that that's exactly fabulous design, but it looks a lot better, right? Okay. So far, so good?
Well, so far, so good. So what?
There's another property called margin. Let's give it 20 pixels. Let's give it something bigger, like we'll do 100 pixels. What this is going to do, when I refresh it, it's going to put 100 pixels in between here and up here and between Bill Murray and the banner. It's the margin outside, it's its boundaries, right? Refresh, and there you go. Now there's 100 pixels everywhere. That's kind of ridiculous looking, but I did a big number so you could see what it does. All right? Good? Okay, next up, border. I'm going to get rid of that margin. All right, so border. The border property, now this takes in a little bit, some more values here. We'll talk about this in depth in a minute. But for now, just push the I believe button. 2 pixels, solid. Julian, give me color. Green, okay. Green, refresh. It's hard to see it because it's similar color there, but there's a border around there that's green, right? And let's make it a little thicker by doing like 20 pixels. There you go, that's a nice, fabulous border. Notice what's happening here. I'm just applying all this stuff to an H1. Again, I'm not necessarily teaching you memorize these properties. These 5 on the screen, you'll definitely want to know them. Okay, but today's just let me expose you to some stuff, right? Now, here's the thing: if I have 2 H1s, they're both going to get that style because I'm targeting all the H1s. Now, a very common question that's going to come up is, can I target just one of the H1s or some of the H1s, some of the paragraphs, not all of the paragraphs? The answer is yes. I'm saying that out loud right now because every class, even though I say it out loud, somebody still asks it. So I have it recorded that I warned you. That you can do that. We will get to that another day, right? But you can do that. I can target Megadeth and Metallica separately if I want to. We'll worry about that another time though, okay? So let's look at these paragraphs here. I'm going to duplicate this one a couple times and we'll just do 2. That's good. I want to target the paragraphs. So here we go. Just P, that's it, right? Remember, the curly braces is what separates things. If those curly braces weren't there, then things get a little messy, right? We put the curly brace in there to say, oh, that stuff's blocked out for the H1. And if we didn't, then this P would be like, is that P supposed to be a selector? Is that a property? What's going on? The compiler or the interpreter gets confused. So we put the curly braces in there to separate things, okay? Now we're separating a block of code for the paragraph, and we're going to go with color of the text is black, and we're going to do background color. Neve, give me color. Turquoise. This may not be a thing. Let's find out. Nice, it is. Lucky guess. All right. And let's put some padding on that. We'll go with 10 pixels or 20, whatever. Okay, that looks all right. Again, this is hideous. I know. This is not me teaching you design skills. It's teaching you design techniques, right? The raw code of it. Now notice what's happening here. You see how Megadeth and Metallica are scooched over. Bill Murray's not. Paragraphs are not. That's because the H1s have a margin applied to them, but the other ones do not, right? This kind of stuff can get really hairy really quick. One thing that you'll find that it's important to understand is that the browser has its own style sheet. Because look, I didn't put any pad or any margin on the paragraph, but there's some margin there. Do you see it? There's that white space there. That's margin. I didn't put that there. The browser did. So in the H1, what did I do? I said, browser, I don't want to do what you think. I'm putting 20 margin on there. I don't care what you say. I'm doing 20 margin. That's why we got 20 up there. But the paragraph's like, oh yeah, well, I'm still going to put it on the paragraph. That's what the browser's saying, right? So you can actually override all of that. I do this all the time in all my programs, all right? If you're familiar with that operator, the asterisk, that is known as a wildcard, and it means everything. That means all tags. Target every one of the tags, set the margin to 0, set the padding to 0. You don't have to do this, but I do this because it resets the browser's default. So now when I refresh, other than Metallica and Megadeth here, all the margins and paddings go away, and the padding in the paragraph will stay. But see that? Now the margin's gone. See how the paragraphs are squished together? Okay. The only margin that's there is what we specifically stated. So if we got rid of this line right here, everything's squished together. Okay. All right. Let's talk about some of these properties in a little bit of detail here. Put the margin back. I'm going to get rid of that reset. Padding and margin are a little bit unique. So is border. They have some different characteristics here. Let's take a look at padding first. There is actually a thing called padding left, padding right, padding top, padding bottom. And I'm going to rearrange this order just for a moment. So these are actual properties: padding top, padding right, padding bottom, padding left. Those are all actual properties. So I can set just the top to 10, and I can set the right to 20, and I can set the bottom to 45 or whatever, and I could set the left to 6.92 pixels or whatever, right? I could put all of that right here in my paragraphs. Okay, and if I save that refresh, and you can see that the top is about what it was. I think I left it at 20, right? Or 10. And then the right is 20, the bottom is a little bigger, and then the left is very small, the 6.9 or whatever I said, okay? Does that make sense? Well, margin works the exact same way. There's a margin top, margin bottom, margin left, margin right. Also, so here's your next one. Here's your first thing I want you to drill into your head. Selectors, properties, values. Second one, everything's a box. Third one, when you see a property that has a hyphen in it, that property will also have a shortcut version of it. Okay, here's what I mean by this. We have padding top, padding right, padding bottom, padding left. Well, the shortcut is truncate at the hyphen, and you get this, padding, right? Instead of padding hyphen something, we just have padding. So if that's the case, what do you suppose is true about the background dash color? There is a property called just background. Exactly right. Very good. All right, so how does this padding work? Well, we've sort of seen it in action, but I want you to think of a clock face starting at noon. Top is noon, 3 o'clock is right, 6 o'clock is bottom, 9 o'clock is left, right? Going around the clock, top, right, bottom, left. Which is why I have these in that order, top, right, bottom, left. Because if I put 4 values here, 10 pixels for top, 20 for right, 45 for bottom, 6.92 for left. Line 24 is the equivalent of that whole chunk of code right there. That highlighted part is the exact same thing as line 24. So I can do it the way I have highlighted or that way. They're the exact same thing. It's your shortcut. And you can see nothing's changed. Now, you're probably asking why. Why one or the other? We'll get there, I promise. Margin works the same way, top, right, bottom, left. Okay? When we look in depth at borders in just a minute, you'll see why this can be useful. So let's get rid of that. With the padding and the margins, if you wanted the top and bottom to be the same, and you want the left and right to be the same, you can actually just do something like this, where this is now the top and bottom, and this is now the left and right. So the top and bottom will be 10, left and right will be 20. Okay? So, refresh. And now the top and bottom are the same as each other, and the left and right are the same. If you want the whole thing to have the same, which is what we did earlier, just set it to have 30 or whatever you want, and all 4 will be 30. Okay? And there you go. Again, don't feel like I'm trying to, quote, teach this part. This is just me showing you some stuff, right? Just showing you the potential, what you can do, and so forth, okay?
Good question. You should ask him that when we get there.
Yes, can you use different units instead of pixels? Yes, and we have a whole lecture dedicated to just that idea coming up in I think it's in Module 3, Advanced CSS. There are, just off the top of my head, about a half dozen different units you can use. You can use inches, you can use pixels, you can use percentages, you can use rems and ems, which you don't even know what that is yet. But yeah, there's a ton of different units you can use for sure. We'll learn all about those. You can use point when you're dealing with font, 30-point font or whatever. Correct. If you did not put a unit, it doesn't know what to do, unless you put 0, because then 0 pixels, 0%, it's all the same, right? Yeah. But if you have to specify a unit for sure. Okay, so let's take a look at the border situation here. Right now I have border 20 pixel solid green. Well, I could do border top 20 pixel solid green, and then I can do border bottom. Let me do border top right, bottom, and left, and I can set that to blue, and instead of solid we're going to do dashed, and this one instead of solid we're going to do dotted, and we'll make this one black, and this one we'll do double, and we'll make it orange. Now behold, we have this fabulous, weird looking, like double orange border, solid green. Oh, I said blue. That's a dumb color to put on top of blue. Let's do corn silk. That's the color, guys. There you go. So that's dashed. The corn silk is dashed. Black is dotted. Green is solid. And orange is double. Now notice again, we have this border dash. What does that mean? There is a thing called border, which we've looked at. But it gets deeper. Okay, let's just take the top here. Border, top, color, green. Border, top, style, solid. And border, top, width, 20 pixels. Lines 15 through 17 are the same thing as line 14. Dig that?
Can you dig it?
So again, what does this tell you? Well, I got all these hyphens here. If I have a border dash top dash color, then that means there is a border dash top. It's like you just truncate the last hyphen. And if there's a border dash top, that means there's also just a border. Border top is the shortcut for these three guys, right? Border is the shortcut for border top, border bottom, border left, border right. Make sense? Now, why would you want to do this? Why do you have to have this level of detail? Why? It comes down to how specific you want to be. There's actually a term you'll get used to hearing, specificity. What level of specificity do you want? So let's take a look at a couple things here. Let's go with, we'll get rid of all this for just a moment. Border, 20 pixels, solid green. There, nice green border around the blue. Okay. But I decided that I want the bottom to be a little different. Border, bottom, color, black. So now what I'm saying is, I want you to make the top, left, right, and bottom 20 pixels, solid, and green. But then, as soon as you make the bottom border green, switch it to black. That's what I'm saying there. Okay? So if we look at this, it happens so fast you never see it, obviously. But that's what happened. It was green for a nanosecond. Okay? Now, we can get a little bit more in detail. Maybe I'm like, well, I want the color, I don't want the color to change, but I want the bottom to be, so we'll go with bottom style to be dotted. So I can change the one piece, so I can change any piece of it I want. Okay? What if I did this though? When I refresh, what do you expect to happen? It will be solid, yeah. The reason it'll be solid is because, and I'll refresh it and prove it to you in a minute, but the reason it's going to be solid is because the first thing we did is said, hey, set the bottom style, border style to dotted. And then immediately I said, well, actually change everything to solid. That's what the line 14 does, right? Line 14. Refresh it and they're all solid again. So this is demonstrating what's called the cascade. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. The cascade is, think of like a waterfall or something, right? The water cascading over the side of the cliff or whatever. The further down you go, the more power the code has. It will always win the battle, right? And if you think about the way a waterfall works, right as you're going over the edge, yeah, the water's rushing you and everything, and it's pretty powerful, but you're not getting crushed to death, right? Once you start falling a little bit, you've got gravity on top of it, and you got the pressure of a foot of water above you, then 2 feet of water above you, then 3 feet. So you have the pressure of more and more water the further down you get. So it's more and more powerful the further down you get. I don't know if that's a good metaphor, but that's one way to think about it. But the point is, the further down the style sheet you go, the more power you have, because you outrank everybody above you, which is kind of backwards, right? You don't, usually you don't outrank the guy above you, your boss or whatever. But in this case, yeah, you're more powerful because you're the most recent thing. Okay, you're the last thing in the document. All right, questions about any of this stuff? We're going to take a turn here now. My hope is that you got some basic idea of just how this works. The idea is you have HTML, which has one purpose: describe content. That's it. Describe content. How do we describe content? Well, I'm describing, sorry, I'm going to leave the caps on, but click here. How do I describe the content? I'm describing line 2 as this is an anchor tag, or this is an image, or this is a paragraph, or this is an H1. It's just describing content. It's telling you what it is. That's it. CSS has one job, and it's to display content. It displays it how you or lay it out. Maybe layout content's better, but it lays out the content. That's it. It takes the structure and it gives it. Think of HTML like the frames of a house being built, right? Then think of CSS as the sheetrock and the shingles and the paint and the vinyl siding or the bricks or whatever to make it look nice. HTML is the skeleton, it's the frame. The CSS is the flesh and bones that makes it look nice. Not the bones, the flesh. The bones are the HTML, right? Does that make sense? Okay, that's one way to think about it. When we get to JavaScript, if we want to further that analogy, JavaScript is your nervous system that makes your mouth work, and right, or the electrical system in your house that makes things animate and happen and move and all kinds of fun stuff and interact and all this. But we'll get there later. But HTML describes content, CSS displays it. Okay. So the hope here is that you understand the basic syntax. You understand that's a selector, that's a selector. All these little guys to the left of a colon are properties, and these are values. Okay, these are all values. Once you have that, here's the idea. You can target any part of your HTML. Anything in your HTML that's inside the body, including the body itself, you can target it with CSS. And you learn, when we learn all the different ways to select things, we've only learned one type of selector, where you select a tag directly. There's a ton of other ways to select stuff. But you learn how to target exactly what you want. Oh, I want the third paragraph that's inside of another tag. That is inside of another tag. I want that one. I just want that one. You can find it, target it, and then style it however you want. Okay? We'll learn how to do that later, but that's the basic idea. Now, let's look at the different ways that we can put CSS into our code. We mentioned this one, embedding. There's also inline. Okay? Inline style, you can go right to the inline here, right in the tag itself, and use the attribute called style. And it's an attribute. Style equals something in quotes, right? Just like we always do. And then I can put CSS right here. And so let's go with Megadeth. And right now, Megadeth is turquoise, 30, black, right? So let's just change the background color. I don't know if that's a thing. Let's try it. Light yellow. Refresh. And it is. That's a thing. It's a light yellow. Nice. Now it washed out the Megadeth there. It's in white text, but that's okay. We can just change that right here to color. It is black. Oh, wait a minute. That's not it. No. I apologize. I said all this stuff was, I was describing the paragraph when I said it was applying to the H1. Sorry about that. So before we did anything, the Megadeth was background color blue, font color white. Sorry about that. We just changed it from background blue to background light yellow. Now we're going to change the color of the font to black. Beautiful. Now notice here, even though we gave H1 some style up here, this is what got displayed. But it still has the border, it still has everything else, right? So here's what happens. The style does its thing here in the style tag, and then the H1, where we have the inline, it overrides it. Inline always wins. It's the most powerful of everything. It's more powerful than anything in the style tag, anything in a separate sheet, it always wins. Okay? And notice I don't even have to do a selector here, right? Because I'm already in the tag. Right here I have to specify this is for H1s. Well, I don't have to do that here because I'm in the tag itself. Dig it?
Can you dig it?
Now, it keeps the style that isn't overridden. Like the padding didn't get overridden down here. I could override it if I wanted to, right? So that's inline styling. I never really use that. I do have one assignment where I expect you guys to use it just so you understand it and can learn how to do it. Because there are time and place for everything. And as we go along throughout the semester, we'll see when's the time and place for each of these. The last one and the biggest one is this right here. It is a separate style sheet, okay? So what we're gonna do here, make a new file. I'm gonna save it. Whatever, I don't care what you name it, but .css, right? That's what matters, .css. So beavis.css, whatever you want to call it, right? Typically style, most people call their style or something like that, but I'm going to use beavis just to prove, doesn't matter. Now, notice what's inside of my style sheet. It's this H1, this P, but it is not the style tag. Why is the style tag not in there? Yeah, you're barking up the right tree. It's CSS. Style, what is style? It's a tag. What's tags? What are tags? HTML. This is not an HTML page. This is a style page, right? This is an HTML page. The style tag is simply there to tell the HTML how to interpret what's in between it. That's it. So that goes away. We don't need that now. Now this makes your site a little cleaner. Of course, if I refresh, all my style went away because I have to tell, the only thing that didn't go away is that light yellow, right? See that? Because that's actually in line right here, okay? I have to tell this document, hey, you're looking for a file called beavis.css. So here's another tag that goes right here in the head, and it's called link. It is a self-closing tag. That is not a thing. Goes like that. There are three attributes: href, type, and relationship, which is just rel. Okay? What do you suppose the href is? Yeah, beavis.css. Or whatever it is, right? The type is, it's actually a text file. It's talking about what's the thing you're linking to. It's actually a text file / CSS code in the text file. That's what goes there. What's the relationship between this file and that file? What's that other file to this file? It's the style sheet, exactly right. There you go. Those three things, links it all together, and behold, everything's back. Do you see the power of that? So take a look here. We have this style sheet now. We've learned three tags that can go into the head. We've got this separate style sheet, and it is the least powerful of the bunch as far as who gets priority. Inline has the most priority. Embed has the second most. CSS has the least most, if that's the way to put that, right? Okay. But here's the power of CSS style sheets. Imagine that this is a 25-page website, and the rule is paragraphs have blue backgrounds. Okay, well, one way to do that is to go to every paragraph here in line and put background color equals blue. And I do it on line 11, and I do it on line 12, and I do it on line 13 if there's another paragraph, and I do it in page 2 and page 3 and page 4. That's ridiculous. The next best thing is to put it embedded above like we did, right, in the style tag. So then I have to put that block of code that we just copied out into 25 pages. Okay, that's not bad, but then if they say, well, we don't want blue anymore, we want red. Well, now I gotta go to 25 pages and change that one little stupid line of code, right? With a style sheet, I link it once. That's it. I link it once, and then when the company decides, no, we don't want blue paragraphs, we want red, I go, okay, done. Red, saved, done. All my pages change because they're all linking to this style sheet. See the power of that? Okay. So refresh, and now it's all red, or that was H1s, not paragraphs. Now imagine this. Everybody in this room, I gave you an assignment, let's say, which I'm not doing, but let's just say I did, to create a CSS page. I want you to just make up things to style an image with, like width and borders and stuff, and then Skylar make another page that's like, you know, you're gonna also make your own version of what colors and paragraphs and everything you want. And Neve, you're gonna make one. Everybody's gonna make one. You all make your own page, and you just put a bunch of CSS that looks like what's on the screen there, just random stuff, whatever you want. Then I can take each of your style sheets, couldn't I, and put them on my computer, and I could simply go here and we'll type in, we'll do Skylar. Is it AR or ER? AR. I type Skylar.css. Now everything changes to be what he deemed the site should look like, right? And then I change it again, and now it's going to look like yours, and so on down the line, right? Well, when CSS first came out, and it was a good 10 years after HTML, I have a company I worked for. I was a web programmer, and I saw this new CSS thing, and I told my boss about it, and his reaction was ridiculous. He said, "Oh, it's a fad, it'll go away, it's not worth learning." Because of people with his attitude, this thing was formed. It's called CSS Zen Garden. What this has been around since the late 90s or early 2000s, whenever CSS became a thing. What this is, it's one single page of HTML with everybody in this room's style sheet, essentially, metaphorically. A whole bunch of developers created a style sheet. And then you can choose to use Julian's style sheet or Skylar's style sheet or whomever's style sheet. And remember, the HTML doesn't change, except for one little line right there on line 5 where we change this to somebody else's style sheet. That's it. So here we go. Here's the default style sheet, where I'm going to click on Trent Walton's style sheet. It's called Apothecary. This is the exact same web page, guys. The HTML did not change. The exact same site with completely different looking everything by swapping out the style sheet. That's all I did. So let's go, let's find where the style sheet links, where they go. They move around depending on what one you're looking at. So a fountain kiss so we're going to click on Jeremy Carlson's style sheet instead of Skylar's. And this is the exact same page. Same content, same everything. The only thing that's different is the style sheet. A Robot Named Jimmy by Melt Media is fun. This one's cool. The only thing that's different is this one little thing right there. That's it. Everything else is identical. That's powerful. And again, because of my boss's attitude and people like him, this was formed. And they've been adding style sheets for years. And you can even add one yourself. There's rules that you have to follow and so forth. But this shows me how powerful CSS is. And you have no idea. It's grown over the years. There's so many things you can do now that only could be done with JavaScript before, that now can be done with 1 or 2 lines of CSS. It's amazing. We're going to dive into it. We got 2 full modules about CSS. That's it, folks. Hopefully that inspires you a little bit to see the power of this and what you can do with it. We'll learn out how to do this kind of stuff as we go along. So any questions?